All right, let's just jump right in. Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're completely ditching the stuffy academic jargon. Instead, we're going to have a casual chat about a 500-year-old book that is, well, it's basically the ultimate survival guide for a cutthroat world. We're looking at the insights of Niccolo Machiavelli, a guy who navigated the brutal, hyper-deceitful political landscape of the Italian Renaissance. And honestly, what he wrote back then, it still hits incredibly hard today.
So before we get into his actual rules, we kind of have to address the elephant in the room. Is Machiavelli actually evil? I mean, his name literally gave us the word Machiavellian, right? Which usually implies you're scheming, manipulative, the whole shebang. But looking at the historical sources, they tell a slightly different story. They frame him not as some cartoon villain, but really just as a brutally honest realist. You see, he didn't write about how people should behave in some perfect utopian world. He wrote about how people actually behave in the real world.
So here's our playbook to break it all down. 5 rules to understand his philosophy. 1. People are unreliable. 2. Be fox and lion. 3. Fear is safer than love. 4. Appearances matter most. And 5. Results matter more than rules. Okay, let's hit rule number 1.
Rule number 1. People are unreliable. It's the brutally honest truth about human nature.
To put it bluntly, Machiavelli's view of humanity is incredibly low. He firmly believed we are all fundamentally self-interested, greedy, shallow, and highly manipulative. He noticed that people are incredibly fickle, ready to jump ship the absolute second it benefits them. Plus, he thought the masses were just plain gullible and super easily conned.
He basically sums it all up with this absolute banger of a quote from the text. A man will sooner forget the death of his father than the loss of his inheritance. I mean, wow. Super cynical, right? But he's basically saying if you really want to know what drives people, you've got to follow their wallet, not their heart.
Moving on to rule number 2. Be fox and lion, the necessity of force and cunning.
Machiavelli uses this really famous animal analogy here. He says a successful leader has to know how to fight, not just with laws, like a civilized human, but with force, like a beast. Specifically, you need to be both a fox and a lion. You need the cunning of the fox to recognize traps and spot when you're being played, but you also need the brute strength of the lion to frighten off the wolves. If you're just a lion, you're going to walk right into a trap. And if you're just a fox, well, you'll get eaten by the wolves. You absolutely have to draw on both.
But here's where he gets super practical. He wrote, "Never attempt to win by force what can be won by deception." So sure, having fangs is great and all, but street smarts and a little deception, that's usually the much safer, smarter play. Think of it like office politics. Why start a huge, messy, public fight if playing it smart behind the scenes gets you the exact same result?
All right, rule number 3. Fear is safer than love, solving the classic leadership dilemma.
Look, we'd all absolutely love to be universally adored, right? But Machiavelli contrasts these two options based on that exceptionally low view of human nature we just talked about. He explains that love is basically just an obligation, and because humans are, in his view, completely selfish, they're going to break that obligation the second it becomes convenient. Fear, on the other hand, fear's backed up by a dread of punishment that never fails. People might forget that they love you, but they will never forget that they are terrified of the consequences of crossing you.
He totally settles the debate with this iconic line. Since love and fear can hardly exist together, if we must choose between them, it is far safer to be feared than loved. It's pure pragmatic logic. He isn't saying you should go out of your way to be a monster just for the fun of it. He's simply saying that if you want a reliable tool to maintain order and keep your position secure, fear just works way better than affection.
But, and this is a massive but, he adds a crucial caveat. There is a huge difference between being feared and being hated. You absolutely want people to fear you, but you definitely do not want them to hate you, because hatred, that leads straight to rebellion. His rule of thumb to avoid hatred is actually pretty simple. Keep your hands off their property and their loved ones. As long as you aren't stealing a man's money or dishonoring his family, the vast majority of people will happily live content and just leave you alone.
Next up, rule number 4. Appearances matter most. The Renaissance power of PR.
He shares this really incredible insight. Everyone sees what you appear to be, few experience what you really are. He points out that the general public is pretty simple-minded and judges almost entirely by superficial appearances. They judge with their eyes, not their hands. Most people are part of this vulgar crowd that gets easily taken in by what things look like on the surface, rather than doing the actual hard work to figure out the truth. Basically, he's explicitly telling leaders to act like total hypocrites. You need to look merciful, honest, and especially religious to the public. It's exactly like crafting the perfect social media image today, you know? You project all the right classic virtues to the crowd while doing whatever it takes behind closed doors. You put on the perfect mask for the public, but you act ruthlessly in private if necessity requires it.
And finally, rule number 5, results matter more than rules, situational ethics, and the ultimate goal.
To really grasp this one, we have to look at how he totally redefined the word virtue, or virtue in Italian. For Machiavelli, being virtuous absolutely did not mean being a good person in the traditional moral sense. Not at all. It meant having the grit, the flexibility, and the drive to do whatever it practically takes to survive, secure your state, and keep order. In fact, if being traditionally good causes your country to collapse, then that goodness is actually a vice.
Let's see how this plays out in practice. He argued that calculated cruelty can actually save a state, whereas excessive tenderness just causes complete chaos. Think about it. If a leader is too soft and lets criminals run wild, it causes widespread misery for everyone. But a few harsh, cruel executions by the leader, that restores order and only hurts a few individuals. In his eyes, a little bit of harshness that unites a country is ultimately far more merciful than being too nice and letting the whole thing collapse into anarchy.
And to get those results, you literally have to be flexible. He wrote, "Whosoever desires constant success must change his conduct with the times." This is a surprisingly modern idea. You have to pivot, adapt, and do whatever the specific moment requires to win. Sticking to a rigid set of moral rules when the game inevitably changes is just a recipe for disaster.
Wrapping up with the ultimate realist, looking in the mirror.
These 5 brutal rules completely challenge our optimistic modern views of mankind, which leaves us with this final, provocative thought to chew on. Was Machiavelli wrong about us, or was he just brutally honest? When you look around at the world today, whether it's politics or business, you really have to wonder, has human nature actually changed at all in 500 years? Definitely something to think about next time you watch the news. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning what you see.